Hi there, everyone. My name's Karl Lehmann, and today I am joined by Nick Elston. Say hello, Nick.
Hello, Nick. Hello, Carl. It's a really old kind of like 70s comedian response, and I do apologize. Don't know where that come from. Hey, thanks for having me on.
Good man. Well, great. We know where this is going straight away, don't we, Nick? So for anybody who's watching this video, then basically I've done a short series of different interviews called Coffee with Karl, which is whereby we sit down, have a bit of a chat, and I'm talking to thought leaders. There we go. We're all primed here with the caffeine. And basically it's about empowering people to live the lives that they want. I'm the author of this book here called Dream It, Planet, Live It. And basically, we've got copies everywhere. We are financial planners, but we're financial life planners. So I think it's really relevant in this kind of new world. I kind of hate that phrase, really, this kind of new world. In the world that we're living in right now, let's reframe it like that, that actually money's one thing, but actually sort of money's just an energy. It allows you to do stuff, good or bad. What I really want to focus on today is kind of life, because that's where, you know, wealth really comes from, the life experiences that you have. And right now, what I found is a lot of people are really struggling in terms of their kind of sort of mental well-being. And so Nick is a bit of a kind of legend in this particular area. So without further ado, Nick, can you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background as to kind of who you are and what you do and why you do it?
Sure, thank you. Legend is probably the most appropriate description. But okay, so my name is Nick Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. Firstly, yes, that's a job. It's been my job for the past 4 years as a professional speaker, sharing my experiences of my own journey through mental illness and through mental health challenges, and right through to my entrepreneurial journey, actually, even right now, and the things that throws up, which is kind of where our paths cross, which is a beautiful synergy. So all of my work is done as a speaker, engaging people on the lived experience of mental health. So what that actually means is, for me, I'm not the solution. I'm not a medical professional. I don't even profess to advise. What I do is to use lived experience and harness that to increase engagement in the amazing people and solutions that are out there already. I think unless you get the engagement, nothing changes. So for me, that's kind of where I see my part in the world, is to help increase people to engage with the professionals, especially, not exclusively men, but especially men, have a real challenge engaging with this stuff. So I try to normalize it. I take the stigma away. It's not just corporate stuff I do schools and prisons, and actually schools are a lot tougher than prisons. Genuine. I do universities and colleges, lots across the board. So I've got a really great kind of breadth of knowledge about different experiences from different walks of life. And as you say right now, that kind of new reality, what's a new reality today is going to be a different new reality tomorrow. Change is inevitable, so we need to get good with change. And I think that's why people are struggling right now. We haven't had to deal with this level of change at such a fast pace for potentially ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously transformational, and you know, in terms of what you do and how you do it sort of with people, I mean, I tell you where this comes from. So as you and I were just talking before we kind of started recording this, I'm part of a mastermind group, and this is a mastermind group where you've got predominantly male business owners from around Britain. So literally from, you know, the whole area of Britain, people come in and meet up, and there's been this real swathe of guys struggling. And I think it's one of those things, when COVID first hit, it was kind of batten down the hatches and sort of that kind of warlike mentality. You know, screw this, we're gonna get through it, and we're going to push through it, and we're going to serve our clients well, and we're going to do everything that we need to do. Then obviously lockdown one eased, and kind of it was eat out to help out, and there was this kind of almost normality to life. And then obviously Boris came in with his like little murmuring saying, well, actually we're probably going to go into lockdown number 2. And I think that was the probably trigger point where actually people have gone, screw me, this is like a big challenge, we're going to do this probably again and again until we get this thing sorted. And particularly the guys that, you know, are my mastermind group, I mean, openly here, a month ago, well, just over a month ago, you know, I had a wobble, and it wasn't depression, and it wasn't anxiety, but there was a period of time where I just didn't enjoy what I was doing, and I'm hugely passionate about sort of what I'm doing, as you can probably tell. I've found my mojo again, guys. By the way,
Good for
so
you.
it's all good. But it's one of those things that for a period of time I thought, screw me, you know, I don't know what's going on here, and I can't understand why, and I didn't have the solution. So what are the strategies that people can do to help themselves in these challenging times when they're facing those sort of problems, those sort of events?
I think you kind of just touched on it there. I think it's also important to recognize that in Britain, especially, we have a bigger problem than most of the world. I
Right.
deliver these talks globally to different countries, different continents, different audiences. And in Britain, in the UK, we have this big problem that we believe that self-care is selfish. Generationally and culturally, we've been brought up to believe that. So actually, when you're feeling like that, you feel guilty if you had to prioritize you above anything else or anyone else even. So actually, it compounds that kind of feeling of guilt, compounds that feeling of anxiety and stress, and it forces you to kind of mask the situation where I think there's a lot of those problems come from. I think the solution, as I said, you touched on kind of already, and it's a piece that I do a lot around vulnerability to bulletproof. If we can start to show vulnerability and make it a daily practice, we
Right.
start to become bulletproof. What do I mean by that? I mean, you start to build resilience. First off, everything's out there. You've got nothing to hide, nothing to mask. Um, but secondly, that you start to live a life on your terms. If you're not showing the world your true self, if you're not even doing business on your terms, then
Yeah.
how do you expect the world to engage with you?
Yeah.
So if you're masking yourself, if you're masking your behavior, if you're trying to be something you're not only does that breed imposter syndrome, but also on the back of that, you're not going to get what you want back in return.
Yeah.
So it takes courage, of course it does, but like the sports coaches call it, marginal gains. If you
Right.
can show a little bit more of yourself every single day, like you bravely have, then you can tell the benefits already. And now you're going to do that more and more and more. And I love that because that means that you are completely kind of approachable. You've already built trust and rapport for other people to confide in you already. And that was my experience from when I first opened up. So for me, it's harnessing the power of vulnerability, but I also do kind of speaking coaching from an emotional storytelling point of view as well. It's not presentation skills per se. How do we deliver emotion to tell our stories?
Yeah.
Um, and part of that journey is very much understanding that, is understanding that if we can show vulnerability, if we can start to inject ourselves into our business, into our conversations, whether you're speaking to one person or 10,000 people, then you truly do start to begin to live a life on your terms. And you do have a tendency then not to wear the mask, because when we're struggling, if we don't have the confidence and courage, conviction in ourselves, then we try to be what people want to see in us. And we
Yeah.
try to be what situations demand of us, but we sure aren't damn sure ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
You look at public speaking like as a thing, that Harvard considered public speaking a greater fear than death in a survey that they did. So that we fear ridicule more than we do dying. So we
Yeah.
wonder why we're so scared to show ourselves, because we're conditioned to believe that. And I think we're both experienced enough to know what it's like coming out the other side of that. And I think that's kind of where I see that lived experience role is empowering other people to start to follow that journey. Because it's transformational. It's kind of euphoria when you start to lift all of your stuff and it just goes. It's amazing. I'm going to shut up now because I get very passionate about this stuff.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And
I see so many people just kind of like really, to use that modern kind of thing, so many people on mute. They just won't project, they won't amplify, they won't put themselves forward. They'll be more kind of subservient to more dominant people, more dominant circumstances, and that kind of fear that they have around everything that they do. But a lot of the time, fear is that false evidence appearing real. It's the assumption that creates the anxiety. It's not the actual thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it's often the anticipation of an event that is more challenging than the event itself. So, you know, in my recent sort of wobble, you know, it's one of those things where I think because I've been doing what I've done for 35 years and run a business that long, you know, I've usually got the answer to kind of most things that I face or other people
Yeah.
face. But there was this just spell of time, and I thought, I don't know why I feel like this, and you know, and the more I couldn't fathom it out, the more it was like, you know, frustrating me. And we were walking on Dartmoor at the weekend. My wife, Sarah, is a clinical psychologist by background, and I said to her, you know, I can't share it with my team because, you know, I'm the leader. and maybe this is a male thing. I'm of a certain age, I'm the leader. I've got to show, I'm holding them all together. And actually, therefore, I can't show any weakness. And Sarah said to me, how wrong you are. If you actually go with your vulnerability, then actually people buy into you more, they'll have your back. And indeed, that's what happened at the team meeting on Monday. I shared it with the team, and they went away, and I asked them to kind of reflect on, what their thoughts were. My practice manager came back with, a list of things. And then my eldest son, Harry, who works in the practice, came back with another list of things. And what, amazed me was like, bang, bang, bang. He was absolutely laser-like in terms of why he was feeling what I was doing. For me, it was about the fact that, the sort of things that I used to do, I'd stop doing. So I used to book my time off before booking my time on. Of course, the pandemic hit, we were preparing for it February time sort of thing. And, we've just been going guns blazing to kind of support and help business owners, and clients alike. And therefore you're pushing it. My wife is a senior leader in the NHS. I've been trying to help and support her. And you just absorb all this stuff, don't you? And then we've got Zoom, the beautiful tool that we're using now to record this. But then, to see somebody in a two-dimensional form, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, I can feel my energy slip down as I kind of repeat that thing. And so now what we've had to say is, right, okay, you can't book me out, hour in, hour out, hour in, hour out. You just can't deal with it. So I have to have an hour now in between each meeting, so I can run around the garden, chase the dog, and make silly noises, and do something just to vent, and then come back refreshed and go again. Really, but it's about being kind to yourself, I think. Really, Nick.
It is. You need to do that. You need to schedule kind of daily recovery. As somebody who has experienced breakdown, as somebody who's experienced the burnout that led to that breakdown, I think it's really the two things that really stand out for me why people reach that point. And it's no surprise that the biggest industries I work in are the high pressure ones, so law, financial services, construction, those kind of industries which have those very unique demands. And actually, you mentioned NHS. I've delivered 2 talks to the NHS kind of frontline staff now over this lockdown period. All of those kind of things that they'll run, and you can actually run really effectively on high anxiety and high nervous energy. But it has an expiry date.
Absolutely.
And I worked it out the hard way. So I try and help other people to realize you don't have to go to that point. But there's 2 main factors, and you've already hit on one of them. One is you'll fill up your work calendar with all your work stuff. You'll fill up the rest of your calendar with all your other commitments. But actually, where do you feature in your own life? If I asked you to get out your calendar, your diary now, and actually, is there a part of that day was exclusively ring fenced for you to rest, recharge, and recover and go again strong tomorrow? Bet you there isn't. Not you necessarily, but everybody else watching this. And this is the problem. We don't value ourselves as we do our biggest client or our closest friend. We will prioritize everything else but.
Yeah.
That's the first reason. The second reason is because of that masking behavior, as I said, is that people are so scared to show themselves or they show their flaws. And like you said, that fear of being open about your challenges, that they end up masking it. And again, once you hide those things in, and as your wife quite rightly says, is kind of, it's a really destructive mechanism. It's a destructive behavior. It may work for a while, but it's destructive. And I think that's the 2 main kind of reasons for me why audiences that I speak to, clients that I speak to, reach that point of breakdown, is because they don't see it coming. I don't think you do see it coming. My experience of breakdown, it wasn't like an angry thing. It wasn't a painful thing per se. That's why a lot of people reach it without even knowing about it. My experience was around feeling absolutely nothing at all. And it's the worst feeling in the world, because to cut off feeling hate and anxiety, I cut off feeling love. To cut off feeling bad, I cut off feeling good. You can't have one without the other. So I just ended up living in this self-contained state of numbness, living under a haze where you don't feel anything. And I think for me, that's where people lose hope, or the hope of something better. That's where it can become quite a dark place. And I think actually at the moment, that feeling of that isolated numbness, that's a real risk with the continued lockdown. The rights and wrongs, obviously, are not for me to decide. That's for people to know what they're doing to do. But that's the fear from my point of view, speaking in the lived experience of mental health.
Okay. Are you comfortable in terms of talking me through a little bit of your own sort of story? Because I think always people sort of buy into, authenticity in terms of what people have been through themselves.
Yeah. So my experience was I had obsessive compulsive disorder as a kid. I had which is obviously mental illness. And I think that's one of the first things that I do with audiences now is to, and also to clients, is to differentiate the difference between mental illness and mental health.
Right.
Mental illness absolutely needs to be professionally treated.
Yeah.
The mental health element is understanding that we all have mental health, whether it's good or bad, like physical health, we all have that. So if that is kind of like a muscle, for want of a better analogy, that's a muscle, then we need to exercise that, especially in between professional treatments, because we all know how long that could take. So this isn't replacing anything, but I try to bring personal development tools in to kind of start to build a playbook for yourself every day to give you a better chance of being more resilient and stronger and happier and maybe even smarter sometimes.
Right.
So mental illness, where it started for me, I'm 42 now. Don't judge, I've got a hard life. But back in the day, the treatment for OCD was purely just 8 weeks of talking therapy. That's what I had. And it didn't correct it sorted some of the obsession, some of the compulsion. What it left me with was something called generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, which went into my teen and to my adult life. And that's really where the burnout element comes from. Because actually through school, you can run on high anxiety and high nervous energy and be very successful, as I said. So from the outside looking in at school, top grades, head prefect in both schools. My way of coping with that as an anxious kid in school was to be everything to everyone. I learned that people pleasing is a very effective mechanism, utterly destructive, but it works. Right. Again, another one of those. So actually, I just kind of ended up flying under the radar. And the problem is that worked so well, I took it into my corporate life. And again, and the rest, as they say, is kind of what happened from there. I went to 2012. I went to a business networking meeting in Portishead in Somerset. It was outside of a Premier Inn, classy guy, choose your breakdowns well. And I left this business, you know what business networking's like. Like I said, I love it. I miss that kind of stuff. But you go in, you pretend to be happy, eat some breakfast, sell your stuff and go again. It's pretty much the format of most meetings. And I left that kind of meeting and I just sat in the car and I just basically started to sob, to cry. And I just shut down. Like I said, for me, it felt like a machine shutting down. You just lost that kind of sense of hope. The hope that something was going to change in terms of mental health. Interestingly, the environment that I had then is the same as I have now. It was me that was out of sync. So we can have the right environment. I've always had a loving family, loving partner, lots of different things in place, but actually you can still be out of sync within that. And so that's kind of where it started for me. And 2 weeks later at the same networking meeting, I turned up and I shared what happened, just like you did. That's exactly how it started. Was by, if I'm honest, it was going to be like Death by Police, Blaze of Glory, like mic drop moment. I was going to go stand up, say my thing, and off I pop kind of thing. But that day really changed my life forever because 3 things happened. The first thing was that everybody in that room queued up to give me their support. Not only that, they queued up to give me a hug. I love hugs. I miss hugs. And the third thing that changed my life forever was this, that suddenly it wasn't about me anymore. And I think I've built a reputation as a speaker on mental health, trying to say things that maybe people can't say if they're solution-based because it increases that engagement to them. And so the reality is for me that it was a very selfish pursuit. It becomes all-consuming. As you said, it defines you. Yeah. You start to believe that is you. It takes away your sense of belonging. You don't feel you deserve any better. So therefore your aspiration goes. And you've got the guilt of trying to mask how you feel into people that are around you as well. So suddenly it wasn't about me anymore. Because what happened was that vulnerability, when you actually use the truth, like the brutal, what I've been called brutally honest truth, then people started sharing their stuff with me straight away about domestic abuse and financial challenges and grief and all these things that we go through in life that we just don't talk about because it's just not the done thing. And that's where that's where it started for me. I started to speak more and more, have more conversations, and I worked out that my place in the world is just to drive the engagement to people like your wife, like practitioners and therapists and all these things that are in place already. But unless you get the engagement, nothing changes. That's kind of It's kind of my story in a very small nutshell. So I didn't ramble too much.
Well, thank you. Well, no, thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure anybody watching this, sometimes when you're in the kind of the pits of despair, you can, I guess, feel like it's only happening to you. And certainly in my mastermind group, where I kind of said, I'm having a bit of a struggle right now, literally around the room, people went, me too, me too, me too, and that kind of normalization of like, it's not just you, and there are valid reasons why people are feeling like this. And what's the analogy you see on social media a lot at the moment? We're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats, and we're experiencing the waves and the peaks and the troughs of it at different times. And therefore, anything that from our ramblings today that people can sort of go, actually, Karl's a pretty sort of strong guy, but my goodness me, look, he's and Nick, look at him, he's got it together now, but look the challenge that he had. It just kind of normalizes it. And actually, I think it's one of those things that over the years, it used to be quite taboo, didn't it, to kind of talk about mental health and illness, and it was a weak.
We do this thing, especially in the UK. Again, it's definitely a UK thing. We're just not comfortable with going there. And there's a lot of taboos, especially in your world, to do a lot of work in the speaking about the lived experience of mental health in the financial well-being space, for example, and the links between money and mental health, and lots of different things that we're just not good with talking about this stuff. And that analogy that you use, that kind of same storm, different boats, I love that. I use that myself. It's really powerful because, as I said, I've delivered talks to the NHS Frontline Conference, I've delivered talks to local residential homes, and everywhere in between. Every one of those kind of stages, every one of those people, those industries, whatever it may be, they've all got their own unique challenges. But actually, that comparison thing that we do, especially here, like, oh, who am I to worry about this when this has got this going on, doesn't work like that. If something causes you pain and frustration, you've got absolutely every right to sort out for yourself, whether you think it's petty, whether you think it's small or insignificant. If it's causing you that pain and frustration, it's irrelevant, really. And I think that's what we need to start to get our heads around. A lot of the time we can beat ourselves up before we even get to the point of asking for help.
It sounds to me like that, obviously, in these times, we can almost be our own worst enemy. And
massively.
Understatement, perhaps. But I'm just curious, have you got like, one or two sort of ideas that people can use as like coping strategies?
So, yeah, I think you're quite right with, there's a tool that I use called Brain Hacks. I like Brain Hacks. So setting out on a mission to prove yourself wrong. So a couple of tools that are really useful on that kind of vein. So I look a lot at conditioning, how we've conditioned ourselves to be. So one of those exercises could be wake up tomorrow morning, question everything you do and everything you say.
Right.
And it's a powerful exercise. You'll be wiped out at the end of it. Because most of the time we run on habits. Those habits aren't always, they're not always healthy. So in terms of, right, why do you wake up at this time? Could you do with more sleep or less sleep? Why do you wake up next to them? Maybe it's a question you haven't asked in a while. Now, I throw that one in, not just because it's a bit of blue, but it's a bit prickly, it's a little bit funny, a bit off the wall, but it's a great example of one of the questions and one of the aspects of our life that we can ring fence. So as somebody who's been to that point, that I would never want to revisit again, that to me, it's about questioning the things that we feel are unquestionable. We should be open to our own questioning all the time. So we should be in a position where every part of our life is through choice. Because I know that when we struggle with mental health and we struggle with anxiety, low self-esteem, low self-confidence, those kind of blips, as you put it, the first thing we sacrifice is choice. So, but that's the only thing we have. We cannot control the uncontrollable. We cannot control pandemics, other people, what they say, what they do. So for me, this exercise really reinforces every aspect of our life. The narrative part comes from what we say to ourselves. Most of the time, we're hardwired to look for danger, so we will reaffirm the negative.
Absolutely.
I know at my worst that I would go to the conference halls like XL London or Manchester Central, places that I speak on stage now, and would say, oh, I can never do that. I'm not as good as them. I can never do. You reaffirm that negative all the time. And even on a small scale, social anxiety was huge for me. If you're going out and so I'm not as good as them, or I don't look as good, or I'm too fat, or those kind of things, you keep reaffirming the negative all the time. So if we can start to pick apart how we talk to ourselves, we can change that. We can reprogram ourselves. I love that. A bit matrixy, but I like that.
That's good stuff, that is, yeah. It's
So, I mean,
interesting. I pick it up on that point there.
yeah,
The kind of self-talk, as we call it. That little voice in your head that talks to you all the time. Is interesting that I said to my wife Sarah years and years ago. I said, why is it your self-talk can actually be quite critical, as you've just explained there. You bring up all of the kind of negatives, or the negatives, and she says, well, it's because that's the way we're designed to keep ourselves alive. That's where it kind of comes from. But sometimes you just have to question that thinking, don't you?
you do. And the scariest thing is, a lot of the time, it's not our voice.
Yeah.
I was on a BBC panel event going back a couple of years ago now, with there was a psychologist, there was a GP, there was me, and we're all talking about, I think it was like hidden disabilities and mental health kind of thing, and we were talking about the power of self-talk, self-narrative. The psychologist said that, and so your wife would know about this, of course, but the psychologist would say that if you're speaking to yourself in the first person, if you're not feeling life right now and you say I am rubbish or words to that effect, then of course that's you, it's your self-confidence, absolutely. But most of the time that we will say to ourselves in the third person, you are rubbish. Now, a lot in that instance, that's what somebody has told us enough and often enough for it to become our conditioning.
I believe
so. There's an American author you've definitely heard of, I would have thought, but a lot of people haven't, called Jim Rohn. Who says you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with the closest. I love that. So that also has a massive influence on, and obviously after kind of reading your book as well, that having that kind of that circle around you to trust. And if you're the average of those people, are you happy with the outcome? And I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to ask for answers on this one, but the second part of those kind of tips that you kind of mentioned was very simply, and it sounds weird, it sounds like hippie stuff, but go with me, it's fun and it's free, a bit fluffy. As part of my recovery, my initial recovery, I kept a worry journal. Right. So I wrote down everything that was making me anxious, any assumed kind of outcomes, because anxiety for me was created in the thought of something, not the doing it. It was also very much based in the past or the future. Today was pretty much okay, really. So I started making a journal, but also the byproducts of anxiety. And that's really important as well. So high aggression, defensive behavior, hypersensitivity. It could be things like lethargy or lack of energy, or even things like jealousy and insecurity. So we seek our worth and our value in the opinions and thoughts of other people. All of those things were thrown into kind of like a ball. And I put those in the journal. And on day one, there were 128 entries. Welcome to GAD. 2 weeks later, I checked back on that one day, and of those 128 things, none of those things happened. So This is why I said we need to set out on a mission to prove ourselves wrong, because most of these fears are completely unfounded and never materialize. There is the story we tell ourselves. So if you, with schools, for example, that a lot of kids will say, oh, I've texted my mate and they don't text back. That's the fact of the matter. But then they create this story. I've fallen out with them. I've offended them, or they create this story, and the story is what creates the anxiety. So we can take control of that. Keep a journal, but check back on it, and just to check in on what actually is a reality. And over a period of time, you will start to train yourself, retrain yourself, what's fact and what's fiction.
Yeah, I tell you what has really, really helped me. One of the guys on my mastermind book recommended this book. It's called "This Book Will Make You Stronger."
That's cool.
It's a mind journal, and it's written by this guy who had a really, really challenging upbringing. I mean, the book is predominantly written for blokes. It's kind of very kind of male-esque, military-esque sort of thing. But the projects that you've got in here and the journaling, there's like exercises to do every day. I've never, cool. I mean, I have kind of journaled to some extent because I use the Michael Hyatt material. Anybody who's familiar with Michael Hyatt in the States. So his full focus planner, helps me kind of run my life, run my business. And part of that is reflecting on stuff as you kind of go through that. But that book is great, and I know there's about 8 other guys that have used that over the last sort of month, and they're all raving about it. So have a look at that.
I will.
Put on Amazon, I think it is.
Nice.
The other thing that I've gone into, I don't know whether you do this sort of thing, is a bit of like breathing meditation. Now, I didn't know, but I felt like I've got a row of books lined up here. So Dr. Chatterjee, easy for me to say, feel better in 5. He talks in here about like actually, all the different types of things that you can do to keep yourself well. So
Yeah.
cardiovascular, strength training, meditation, blah, blah, blah. And what I didn't appreciate actually sort of reading this book, out of all of them, the best thing is meditation or mindfulness or breathing. It's best for your heart, your blood pressure, just your.
It's huge.
I couldn't believe it. So I do this like 5-minute thing every morning now. So you talked about question everything that you do. And I kind of did that. And I went back to getting back up at like a little bit earlier in the morning, doing my weight training. I've started skipping again, which is quite funny. The dog thinks I'm crazy. By the way, just at that point, Nick, what worries me, you said we become the byproduct of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. I spend most of my time with a golden retriever. What does that tell you?
Your hair starts to grow and goes a little bit blonde, and I don't know what's going on.
I love people. I love people. That's what it tells me.
Breathing is huge. I mean, especially with stage events, that there's kind of like a pre-match and a post-match ritual that I've got for stage events to make sure that I'm at kind of peak state when I get on there. Now, breathing is one of those things. So I do a mechanism where I breathe in for 6 seconds through my nose, hold it for 6 seconds, and out for 6 seconds through my mouth, and really push out the exhale on the last 6. Now I do that as many times as it needs to kind of put myself in a calm kind of state. That really helps. I listen to playlists of music, always country music, but playlists of music. So faster music to get my energy up when I go on, slower music to to manage my state back down again. That's also important, is avoiding that boom and bust kind of thing. Breathing is a huge part of that. So especially when I was traveling all over the place after an event that I would feel absolutely wiped out, I started using an app called Balance. And Balance is a meditation app, which it starts off just doing like 2-minute meditation a day. And now it's up to 20 minutes a day, something like that. So it basically starts doing, my mind firefights so much. It was really difficult to meditate to start with. It really trained me to do that far more effectively. And I definitely see the results now. I sleep better now.
Yeah.
And actually on that note, especially, that sleep regulation has been really important over lockdown. So whereas boundaries are really blurred, I read somewhere that if you go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every day, 7 days a week, that your body gets used to regulating that energy throughout the day. So you avoid the peaks and the troughs.
Okay.
So I start going to bed at 11. I wake up at 6, even on a Sunday, which kind of sucks. But it works brilliantly because I haven't got those dips I was experiencing before, even when I'm delivering, like you said, maybe 4 times a day as opposed to twice a day in real life.
Yeah.
So that's been really useful as well. So I think anything you can do to put into your playbook. I think any fans of personal development, I'm not sure if you feel this, most of the books you read make you feel that if you don't do everything in this book, you're a rubbish human being. Whereas for me, it's I watch loads, I listen to loads, I read loads, and if there's one line of a whole book that jumps out, that goes into my playbook. It goes into my blueprint on managing my state. Because what I love, you may not love, and vice versa. So for me, it's all about working out what's good for us.
Yeah.
And being selfish in a very positive way.
Yeah, I'm half German, so I guess I think in a certain way. But when I go through a book, normally I'd read it literally from beginning to end, and I have to read every single word, every single line, every single page, every single chapter in a very methodical way. Now, sometimes I just flick through the book and just see what lifts off the page at me.
Yes,
that just resonates with me at that particular moment, that particular time.
I was gifted this by a client this week. Not sure if you've seen this.
Oh, no, I don't think I have that.
So it's called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Macquarie. But it's one of those books you just open up, and it's got some really, really simple kind of like motivational or kind of inspirational nice. or deep kind of quotes, but set to this story of these of the boy and the 3 animals. Beautiful book. It looks and feels beautiful as well.
Yeah.
Definitely recommend you getting that, because it is one of those books you just think, yeah, I needed that today.
Yeah. Another one somebody recommended to me, which I've started rereading, is Chicken Soup for the Soul.
I've not read that in years. I should reread that. I love that book.
It's all about counting your blessings each day, really. It's just like finding something each day that you can help somebody else with, or give a positive comment. So trying to catch people do things right, because the way the brain works is if you catch other people doing things right and you give them some positivity, you reap what you sow, don't you? What you dwell upon grows, good
Yeah,
or bad. So if you're filling your mind with good stuff, that grows and grows and grows. If you fill your mind with doubts and negative stuff, that grows and grows and grows. So
exactly.
yeah,
Fully subscribe to that.
but that's amazing. So what else? What else do we need to know? I feel like we could go on for hours here, actually, Nick. But
Yeah, we could actually. What else do we need to know? Okay. I think for me, it's kind of recognizing that. I know it's kind of been really used a lot, but that kind of okay to not be okay. I think we kind of need to know that right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people going through, and again, overused term, but unprecedented times. But the reality is that new reality is recreated every single day. I think we need to get good with change. When I start working with, especially corporate clients, always speak about like the biggest kind of problems that are coming up right now. Change is always at the top, but change is inevitable. We can't change that. Pardon me. But what we can do is try to build our resilience to it's not to stop the things that knock us down, it's to increase our resilience to bank straight back up again. And I think there's so much power in that kind of comeback story, even on a daily basis. And that way we can then acknowledge that it doesn't have to define us. If one thing happens to us, it doesn't have to define us. But generally, a lot of the things that happen, it takes the same energy to destroy us a lot of the time as it does to use as a catalyst to go forward. Right. It's just how you harness that energy and put it in the right way. So I know these are extreme examples, but I know people that have been through really harrowing, kind of horrible situations that they would ever wish to happen ever again. However, they've taken that and they've done something beautiful with that. They've done something wonderful with it. So whether it's formed a charity, started a cause, raising awareness, whatever that may be. And I think I love that, because it means you cannot change the stuff that happens. You cannot control the uncontrollable, but you can choose how you react and how you come back. And I think for me, that's the thing to keep the biggest focus on right now. The quote that I always use all over the place, probably sick of me saying it now, but people that have seen me speak a few times, but every storm runs out of rain.
Right. I love that.
It's an amazing, by the way, if you love country music, it's an amazing track by Gary Allan. Love it. But every storm runs out of rain. We need to know that. I think at the moment, we need to know that every storm we've ever been through has at least passed. You've at least survived because you're here. But most of the time, despite the most kind of like violent and harsh and negative situations and the lessons it throws us, we learn.
Yeah.
And sometimes those lessons and those learnings are brutal, but we do learn, we do evolve. And actually, we come through most of our challenges smarter and stronger, sometimes even happier than we did without that experience happening. That's certainly my experience for sure.
Yeah.
So I think we need to know that at the minute we don't know what the end of this storm looks like, even when it's going to be, but it will pass. And when we look back on this, we will want to make sure that we've done everything we can to, like you say, pay it forward to people, to make sure we're acting in the right way, not just to other people, to ourselves as well. But sometimes I think there's also that responsibility of who looks after the people that looks after people. You mentioned you have a team, you have a family. At the moment, there could be, if you've got a team of 10 people, you could be carrying 11 burdens on your shoulders. There's no surprise that could take a toll right now. So I think we need to get good with knowing how we can help people. But most importantly, I think the powerful question is always a negative one. How can we help people? And for me, people come to me, people will come to you, people will come to lots of us who are not medical professionals. They're not coming to us to be fixed. If they wanted to be fixed, they would go to a medical professional. But they are coming to you to be heard. So you've built enough trust and rapport with that person that's in front of you for them to feel safe enough to share with you. So there is a responsibility, but the responsibility, as I see it, starts and ends with getting very good at active signposting, knowing how can we help people that come to us, knowing that the solutions like Mind have an urgent help button, that Time to Change have downloadable materials for teamwork on mental health, and lots of different things. But even on a local level, I'm based just north of Bristol. I know all the local charities that work with domestic abuse, with drugs and alcohol addiction, with mental illness in children, getting good at knowing what's on your doorstep, so that when people do have that conversation with you, you can help them the best way you can as a non-medical professional. But you do it without taking on the burden of that of their challenge as well. But most of the time, as I say, essentially in life, people just want to be heard and they want to be understood. But right now, we don't feel that way. And I think so if we can do that, if somebody comes to you, put the laptop away, put the device away, listen to them, engage them, and most of the time they find their own way forward. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a really simple process.
Yeah.
But we just need to drop a little bit of our, not ego, but I think we need to show more vulnerability to be able to have that depth of conversation.
I think it's interesting because on my mastermind, there's one of the members, he volunteers for the Samaritans actually. And he was saying, if anybody does come to you, above all else, give them time, give them your time. If they've taken the courage to come forward to you, then, they're regarding you as a trusted, advocate, aren't they, really, at the end of the day?
Yeah. And again, there is a response. It's not as it said, there's not a responsibility. The responsibility, as you said, is it could be the only time that they decide to ever open up to anybody. Yeah. That's a responsibility. It's very real, but it's how you approach that. Because the alternative to that, to protect yourself, would be to keep them at arm's length. We don't really want to do that. If somebody trusts us enough to share, we want to be there to support them the best way we can. So yeah, that for me, that it's all about active signposting. If it's a personal or family member that's struggling, sometimes it can be very difficult to help them because they see you as a different role in life. They're not seeing you as a potential solution or even a signposting. So for me, I use conversational signposting. So I give out materials and handouts and stuff at my events. And if a lot of the time it is blokes, it has to be said. So someone will say, I don't know how to help my husband. He just went engaged in this stuff. I'll give her like a handout and say, I saw this big beardy guy with a cap on talking about this today. What do you think? Or make it really, really light, really, really engaging, or leave it on the coffee table so that he can just pick it up at his own time. And I think for me, you need to create an environment where you empower people to make the changes that they want to make, as opposed to instruct them or signpost per se.
That was a question I was going to ask, actually, because I read yesterday that the number of suicide type sort of conversations that have been happening since the first lockdown has gone up by, I think it was 300%. The number of paramedics that have been called out to suicide attempts has gone up astronomically. So people watching this, if you're in a state of actually thinking, oh my gosh, there is no alternative, what steps can they take, or indeed, if you're the sort of person that somebody comes to you to talk about that, how is it best for the recipient then to kind of just be there with them? Have you got any tips on that at all, Nick?
Yeah, well, it's kind of stuff we covered already. Give them time, listen, truly listen to what they're saying, because a lot of the time the problems that, and you'll understand this being a leader in business as well, that the challenge that people come to you with is not usually the challenge that's the problem. It's a byproduct of the problem. So if you really listen to what they have to say, but then also to ask them how they want to, how you want them to help, and actually give them that upfront contract of even saying, I know I'm not a medical professional. I know that I can't help you in that way. I can't fix you in that way, but I do want to support you the best way I can. Be upfront. So you've got that bit done. You've set the ground rules. And I definitely recommend anybody taking the Mental Health First Aid 2-day course. It was an amazing investment in my time, relatively low cost. I think it was just a few £100. That will give you so much more insight into how to signpost and look for the mental illness side of things, especially. And also things that you didn't even know about in terms of things like suicide and the kind of the signs to look for and stuff. And it's really, really fascinating 2-day course. I recommend anybody checking out.
So where do they find information regarding that course? So
you go to, I think it's mhfa.org. I'm not sure about the dot bit, but it's Mental Health First Aid England.
Right.
Or wherever you are. And if you Google that, and it will come up, and then it will give you your list of local providers. So you can pick who you want to work with from the people in your area.
Brilliant.
At the minute, it's being done virtually as well, so you can do this whilst you're still on lockdown and stuff.
Oh, that's kind of really useful then, isn't it? Obviously,
Yeah,
because feeling isolated, this can just exacerbate that really. And
we
but
can.
equally, it's a tool. In my kind of journaling the other day, it said write a list of everything that you're thankful for this year, and I thought, are you having a laugh? This is like 2020. What the hell? But I actually sat down with a couple of sort of ginger tea here, and I just stared out the window, and I was sat here, and I thought, I'm thankful for that fact that when I look out this window here, I'm looking straight down the coast. I'm thankful for the fact that there's palm trees there. And then all of a sudden, when she started going, there was a whole list of stuff. And
It's
one of the
amazing.
things
Yeah,
that surprised me on there was I'm thankful for the fact that we have more contact with our friends now than we did in any previous year, because actually we make more of an effort. And there's a number of us who meet up, affectionately called on at the COVID arms every 2 weeks on Zoom, which is something that we started back in March. But do you know what? The amount of time that we've met on there, people say, this is the thing in my diary that has kept me sane throughout this. The fact
yeah,
that we all meet up as a
hugely.
group and we just chew the fat and we're there for each other.
I think that's amazing. I think gratitude is huge, as you said. I think, as a wise man once told me, is kind of to achieve more of what you want to achieve, to attract more of what you want to attract, you need to start to be grateful for what you've got right now, no
Right.
matter where you are. Even if you feel like you said 2020 could do one, you're alive, you're breathing. There's two good things right to start with, and everything can go from there. But it's amazing when you start to open your eyes really to what you are grateful for. You're surrounded by so much, you
Yeah.
just don't see it. And now more than ever, I think that's why that change of scenery, like you said, even just looking out of a different window, just really starts to shake things up quite a bit. And I mean, I'm quite fortunate. I live in a place where I've got kind of lots of common land and country land next to me, so I can walk loads. But even when in between lockdowns, that we kind of dipped down to Wareham for the week in Dorset to do the coast path, and it was just so great to have that kind of change of scenery, because this has been a hugely conditioning year. You cannot tell a nation to stay home, save lives, and not expect anxiety coming away from that point.
Yes.
And everyone's going to be in different points.
Yeah.
I know people that are really anxious about going back to the office.
Yeah.
I know people that are really anxious about having to work from home still. And so there's no one catch-all. That broad brush approach that we try and take, especially in business, needs to go out the window. Now more than ever, we have human-to-human conversations on a one-to-one basis with no prior judgments.
That is, well, I think it's just absolute gold what you said there, because it's one of those things, everybody's trapped inside here, but they're all in different points in this process, aren't they? And it's going to get more interesting as time goes on. I know we got the vaccine that potentially is coming up on the horizon, all the rest of it, but no one knows the long-term implications of that. We've got winter pressures brought to bear and all the rest of it, but actually there are certain things that we can control. And if you can just be kind to each other, and as employers, leaders, if we can help our teams just be the best that they can be, and whatever that means to them, then that's what we have to do, isn't it? Right?
Me too.
I thought you were grabbing some kind of prop there.
She is my pet Ewok.
Oh, brilliant. So if people want to reach out and connect with you, Nick, how is it best for them to do that?
So you can reach me on nickelston.com. You can message me through the website. My LinkedIn and YouTube links are through the website as well, blogs and videos and stuff. Very active YouTube channel with interviews with lots of different interesting people from the world of mental health and beyond. So that's where you can find me, nickelston.com, and it'd be great to connect with anybody else who's tuned in.
Okay, and can you just clarify exactly what services you provide for people and organizations?
To summarize, I would say I'm an inspirational speaker on a lived experience of mental health. I help increase engagement to your mental health and wellbeing initiatives. It's the first thing I do.
Right.
Second thing is I'm a transformational speaking coach, which basically means that I use emotional storytelling to help people find themselves and deliver their message, whether it's one-to-one or thousands of people. And finally, I kind of provide what I call an in your corner mentoring service. So it's not coaching per se. It's very much about just having somebody there to bounce around ideas off, somebody to go to when you feel like you need to talk, that kind of stuff. And I run that tends to be for kind of like executive level people within an organization.
Right. Brilliant. Well,
So,
thank
yeah,
you for
thank you.
sparing your
It's been
time
fun.
with us today. It's been good fun. And just part of the little outreach that I'm doing, I know a lot of people are struggling at the moment, and sometimes sort of financially as well. So one of my kind of give backs to kind of people is that if they want a copy, of my book here, the Dream It, Planet Live It book, if you go to dreamitplanetliveitbook.com/offer, then you can get a copy of the book for just £1. Whatever it is, it's
Wow.
£10.99 on Amazon, but for £1 you can get it. And it's just part of my
Nice.
kind of giving back. We've got limited supplies, at that level. But again, in this time, if it just helps people get a sense of perspective of where they are now, where they want to be, and how the heck they're going to get there, then hopefully that will just kind of help them. But I genuinely, Nick, appreciate the time that you spent with us today. It's been
Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. And we should probably do a follow-up in 12 months' time and see where we're at then as well.
So who knows where we're going to be? Yeah, no worries. See you
Cheers,
soon.
pal.
Cheers, guys.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.